The hotel coffee tasted like burnt rubber mixed with disappointment, which pretty much summed up my entire week at this facilities management conference in Albany. I'm Sam Mitchell, 43 years old, and I've spent the last 3 days listening to presentations about energy-efficient lighting systems and proper bathroom maintenance protocols. Real exciting stuff. I was sitting in the lobby, scrolling through emails about broken air conditioning units back home, when my phone buzzed with a text from Nina, my wife of 18 years. Just FYI, told everyone we're separated for now. A break just to figure things out. I stared at the screen for a full minute, reading those words over and over. Separated? For now? Figure things out? What the hell was there to figure out? 3 days ago, when I left for this conference, everything seemed normal. Well, as normal as things had been lately. My hands started shaking as I typed back. What are you talking about? We never discussed any separation. The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, finally. We'll talk when you get back. I need space to think. Space to think, right. I knew exactly what kind of space she needed, and it probably involved that smug yoga instructor Dan Hartley, who'd been hanging around our apartment building way too often lately. Dan with his perfectly sculpted abs and his stupid man bun and his constant talk about mindful living and authentic connections. I called her immediately, straight to voicemail, called again, same thing. My mind raced back through the last few months, connecting dots I'd been too stupid or too trusting to connect before. Nina's sudden obsession with yoga classes, her new girls' nights that seemed to happen every other day, the way she'd started doing her hair differently, buying new clothes, spending hours on her phone with a secretive smile. And Dan, always Dan, showing up at our building's community events, offering to help Nina carry groceries, suggesting she try his advanced flexibility sessions. The guy was like a persistent rash that wouldn't go away. I grabbed my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. My blood pressure spiked when I saw the recent transactions, spa treatments, expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together, charges from some boutique hotel downtown. All while I was busting my ass managing a crew of maintenance workers and dealing with entitled corporate tenants who thought I was their personal handyman. That's when I noticed something interesting. Our lease was in my name. I was the primary tenant, had been since we moved in 5 years ago. Nina's name was on there too, but legally, I had the power to make decisions about the apartment. I called our landlord, Mr. Gilroy, a grumpy Irish guy in his 70s who'd been renting apartments in our neighborhood for decades. Sam, how's the conference going? Learning about fancy new toilets? He chuckled at his own joke. Actually, Mr. Gilroy, I need to give you notice on the apartment. 30 days, starting today. Would you listen? There was a pause. 30 days, but Nina called yesterday asking about renewing the lease for another year. Said you two were settling in for the long haul. My jaw clenched. Plans changed. I'm the primary on the lease, right? Well, yes, but then consider this official notice. I'll email you the formal letter tonight. After I hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, my mind spinning with possibilities. If Nina wanted a separation, I'd give her one, but it would be on my terms, not hers. I called my old friend Mick, who ran a boxing gym and dive bar on the south side of town. He answered on the second ring. Sammy, how's married life treating you? It's not. Nina just texted me that we're separated. Jesus, while you're out of town? That's cold, even for her. Mick had never been Nina's biggest fan. He thought she was pretentious and controlling, which wasn't entirely wrong. But she was my wife, or had been, and I'd always defended her. I need a favor, Mick. I need somewhere to stay when I get back, just temporarily while I figure things out. You got it. I've got a studio apartment above the bar. It's not fancy, but it's yours as long as you need it. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Nina's text, about the casual way she'd dropped this bomb on me. For now, she'd said, like our marriage was some kind of trial subscription she could cancel at any time. By morning, I'd made my decision. I packed up my conference materials, checked out of the hotel, and started the 4-hour drive home. But first, I made a few phone calls. I called the bank and moved all the money from our joint checking account into my personal account. Legally, I had every right to do it. Then I called the credit card companies and removed Nina as an authorized user on my cards. I forwarded our mail to a P.O. box I rented online. As I drove through the gray November landscape of upstate New York, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't reacting to Nina's decisions. I was making my own. I pulled into our apartment complex at 2 in the afternoon. Nina's car wasn't there, which meant she was probably at another one of her yoga sessions with Dan. Perfect. I called a moving company and paid extra for same-day service. Within 3 hours, a crew of guys was loading my stuff into a truck. My furniture, my electronics, my books, my tools, even the coffee machine I'd bought with my own money. I left Nina's things exactly where they were, but everything that was mine or that I'd paid for was going with me. I wrote her a note and left it on the kitchen counter next to the spare key. You wanted space. Here's all of it. The lease is terminated. You have 30 days, Sam. By 6 o'clock, I was settled into Mick's studio apartment. It wasn't much. A bed, a small kitchen, a bathroom that had seen better days. But it was mine. No more listening to Nina complain about my work clothes in the hamper or my sports highlights on TV. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with missed calls and texts from Nina, but I ignored them, let her sweat for a while. Around 8, she finally got through. Sam, what the hell did you do to our apartment? Our apartment? I thought you wanted a separation. Separated people don't share apartments. I meant a trial separation, a break to figure things out. Yeah, well, I figured it out. We're done, permanently. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end. You can't just take all our stuff and disappear. I took my stuff. Check the receipts if you want to argue about who paid for what. The lease is terminated. I'm the primary tenant, remember? You've got 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Sam, please, we need to talk about this like adults. Adults don't send separation texts while their spouse is out of town. Adults have conversations. There was a long pause. Then, I know you're upset about Dan. Don't. My voice came out harder than I intended. Don't say his name to me right now. It's not what you think. Really? So you haven't been sleeping with him? Another pause. Longer this time. I thought so, I said. Enjoy your space, Nina. You've got plenty of it now. And I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. I managed the maintenance crew at a mid-size office building downtown, dealing with everything from broken elevators to clogged toilets. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well and I was good at it. My crew, Tony, Miguel, and Dave, could tell something was off. You okay, boss? Tony asked while we were replacing fluorescent bulbs on the 3rd floor. You seem different today. Wife and I separated yesterday. Shit. Sorry, man. That sucks. Actually, it doesn't. I feel better than I have in months. And I did. There was something liberating about not having to worry about Nina's moods, or her passive-aggressive comments about my job, or her constant criticism of everything I did. Around lunchtime, I got a call from an unknown number. Is this Sam Mitchell? The voice was male, nervous. Depends who's asking. This is Dan Hartley. I think we need to talk. I almost laughed. Do we now? Look, I know you're upset, but Nina and I, it's not what you think. We're just friends. She's been going through a difficult time in your marriage, and I've been providing spiritual guidance. Spiritual guidance, is that what you call it? Sam, I understand you're angry, but there's no need for hostility. Nina just needs someone who understands her journey toward authentic living. I hung up on him mid-sentence. Spiritual guidance, what a load of crap. That evening, I decided to check out the local bar scene. I ended up at Murphy's, a dive bar about 10 minutes from my new place. It was the kind of joint where the beer was cheap, the lighting was dim, and nobody asked too many questions. I was nursing my second beer when I saw him. Dan Hartley, sitting in a corner booth with a blonde woman who definitely wasn't Nina. She looked young, maybe mid-20s, and she was hanging on his every word as he gestured dramatically about something. I watched them for a while, feeling my anger build. This guy was supposedly providing spiritual guidance to my wife while he was out picking up college girls at dive bars. I finished my beer and walked over to their table. Dan, what a surprise seeing you here. He looked up, his face going pale when he recognized me. Sam, hi. Aren't you supposed to be somewhere teaching yoga or providing spiritual guidance to married women? The blonde looked confused, glancing between us. Do you two know each other? Oh, we know each other, I said. Dan here has been very helpful to my wife. Very hands-on with his guidance. Dan's jaw tightened. Sam, maybe we should discuss this privately. Why? I thought you were all about authentic living and honest communication. I turned to the blonde. Did Dan mention he's currently sleeping with a married woman? Very spiritual of him. She looked disgusted and slid out of the booth. Seriously? You're married? It's complicated, Dan started. No, it's not, I interrupted. He's screwing my wife while pretending to be her yoga teacher. Real complicated. The woman grabbed her purse and left without another word. Dan stood up, trying to look intimidating, despite being 6 inches shorter than me. You had no right to do that. I had every right. You want to destroy my marriage? Fine. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. I picked up his beer and accidentally poured it over his car keys, which were sitting on the table. Oops, guess you'll need to get those cleaned before you drive home. As I walked away, I heard him cursing behind me. It was a small victory, but it felt good. The next few days were a blur of logistics and revelations. I'd underestimated how quickly word would spread through our social circle. Nina had been busy spinning the story, painting herself as the victim of an unreasonable husband who'd abandoned her without warning. But I had receipts, literally. Our daughter Tess called me from college, her voice tight with anger. Dad, what the hell is going on? Mom says you just disappeared and took everything. That's not exactly what happened, sweetheart. Then tell me what did happen, because Mom is crying every time I call her. I sighed. Tess was 19, a sophomore at State University, and she'd always been closer to Nina than to me. This was going to be complicated. Your mother decided she wanted a separation. She texted me while I was at a work conference. No discussion, no warning, just a text. So you decided to punish her by taking all your stuff and canceling the lease? I decided to take her at her word. She wanted separation, so I gave her one. Dad, that's so petty. Is it, or is it just efficient? There was a pause. She says you're being cruel. Did she mention Dan Hartley? Another pause, longer this time. Who's Dan Hartley? Ask your mother. That evening, I got a text from Tess. Mom says Dan is just a friend who's been helping her through a difficult time in your marriage. I texted back. Check your mom's Instagram from the last 2 months. Look at the photos. Count how many times Dan appears in them. Then ask yourself if that looks like just friends to you. 20 minutes later. Oh my God, Dad, I'm so sorry. But the real shock came when I found out who was orchestrating everything behind the scenes. I was having lunch with my old friend Pete, who worked in HR at Nina's company, when he dropped the bombshell. You know, it's funny, Pete said, picking at his sandwich. Ava Morrison has been asking a lot of questions about Nina lately, wanting to know about her performance reviews, her travel expenses, stuff like that. Ava Morrison, Nina's best friend since college, the one who'd been supporting Nina through our difficult time, the one who'd been encouraging Nina to explore her options and not settle for less than she deserved. What kind of questions? I asked. Professional stuff, but it seemed weird, like she was building a case or something. That got my attention. Building a case for what? I don't know, but she's been really interested in Nina's business trips, her expense reports, that kind of thing. And she's been asking about openings in Nina's department. I felt something click into place. Ava worked in HR at a competing firm. She'd always been jealous of Nina's success, her corner office, her salary. And she'd been the one pushing Nina to take some time to figure out what you really want. That night, I did some digging. Social media, mutual friends, casual conversations. The picture that emerged wasn't pretty. Ava had been playing a long game. She'd introduced Nina to Dan, encouraged the yoga classes, suggested the girls' nights that were really opportunities for Nina to spend time with Dan. She'd been feeding Nina's dissatisfaction with our marriage, convincing her that she deserved better, that I was holding her back. But why? What did Ava get out of destroying my marriage? The answer came from an unexpected source, my landlord, Mr. Gilroy. You know, he said when I stopped by to finalize the lease termination, that friend of Nina's, the redhead with the fancy car, she was asking a lot of questions about your apartment. What kind of questions? About the lease, about who was responsible for what, about what would happen if one of you wanted to break it. This was months ago, mind you, before Nina ever mentioned any separation. Months ago. Ava had been planning this for months. I started putting together a timeline. Ava introduces Nina to Dan. Ava encourages Nina's dissatisfaction with our marriage. Ava plants the idea of separation. Ava researches our lease situation. Ava probably even suggested Nina send that text while I was out of town, knowing it would catch me off guard and make me react emotionally. But I still didn't understand her endgame until Mick mentioned something over beers. You know what's weird? He said. I saw that friend of Nina's, the redhead, having dinner with the yoga guy last week. Looked pretty cozy for two people who supposedly just met through Nina, Ava and Dan. Of course, I started watching them more carefully. It didn't take long to spot the pattern. Dan would have his sessions with Nina, then meet Ava later. Ava would comfort Nina after their girls' nights, then disappear for hours with no explanation. They were playing Nina, both of them. Dan was the honey trap, keeping Nina distracted and emotionally dependent. Ava was the puppet master, pulling strings and positioning herself to benefit from the chaos. But benefit how? What was Ava's real goal? The answer came when Pete called me with urgent news. Sam, you need to know something. Ava Morrison just applied for Nina's job. Everything clicked into place. Ava hadn't just been destroying my marriage for fun. She'd been systematically undermining Nina's life, setting her up for professional and personal failure so she could swoop in and take Nina's place. Think about it. Nina loses her marriage, becomes emotionally unstable, starts making poor decisions at work. Meanwhile, Ava is there as the supportive friend, gathering intelligence about Nina's job performance and building relationships with Nina's colleagues and clients. When Nina inevitably crashes and burns, Ava would be perfectly positioned to step in as the stable, competent replacement. It was actually brilliant, in a sociopathic kind of way, but I wasn't going to let it happen. First, I needed proof. I started documenting everything: dates, times, locations where I'd seen Ava and Dan together. I pulled our credit card statements and highlighted all the charges that corresponded to Nina's supposed girls' nights with Ava. Charges at restaurants and hotels where Nina was clearly not present, based on her own social media posts. I also started recording my conversations with Nina. In our state, only one party needs to consent to recording, so it was perfectly legal. I wanted evidence of her lies, her manipulation, her attempts to rewrite the history of our marriage. The recordings were revealing. Nina had convinced herself that I was the villain in this story, that I'd been emotionally distant and unsupportive. She'd forgotten about the years I'd worked double shifts to pay for her graduate degree, the times I'd covered for her when she'd screwed up at work, the way I'd always encouraged her ambitions even when they meant less time together. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source: Tess. My daughter had been doing her own investigation, and she'd discovered something interesting. Ava had been posting photos on her private Instagram account, photos of her and Dan together, going back months before Nina had ever mentioned yoga or separation. "Dad, look at this," Tess said, showing me her phone during one of our coffee meetings. "This photo is from July. Mom didn't even start yoga classes until August." The photo showed Ava and Dan at some trendy restaurant, looking very much like a couple. The caption read, "Planning something special with my favorite co-conspirator." Co-conspirator. She'd literally called him her co-conspirator. "There's more," Tess said, scrolling through the photos. "Look at this one from September." It was Ava and Dan again, this time at what looked like a hotel bar. The caption, "Phase 1 complete. On to Phase 2. Jesus," I muttered. She documented the whole thing. "It gets worse. Look at this one from last week." The photo showed Ava in what was clearly Nina's office, sitting behind Nina's desk. The caption, "Trying on the future for size." I felt my anger building, but it was a cold anger now, calculated. I knew exactly what I was going to do. The plan was simple: expose them all at the same time, in the most public and humiliating way possible. Our city had an annual food festival every November, a big community event that drew thousands of people. Nina's company was one of the sponsors, and Nina herself was supposed to give a speech about corporate community involvement. But Nina wouldn't be giving that speech. I would. You see, I'd been volunteering with the festival committee for 3 years. I knew the organizers, I knew the schedule, and I knew how to work the sound system. More importantly, I knew that Nina, Ava, and Dan would all be there. Nina for her speech, Ava to network and schmooze, and Dan because he'd convinced several local businesses to sponsor his wellness workshops at the festival. I spent the next week preparing. I created a PowerPoint presentation that told the whole story: the timeline of the affair, the evidence of Ava's manipulation, the proof of Dan's double dealing. I had photos, text messages, credit card statements, social media posts, and recorded conversations. I also prepared a speech. Not the angry, bitter rant you might expect, but something more devastating: a calm, factual recitation of the truth, delivered with just enough sarcasm to keep the audience engaged. The festival was held in the city's main park, with a large stage for presentations and performances. I arrived early, while the vendors were still setting up, and made my way to the sound booth. "Hey, Sam," called out Jerry, the festival coordinator. "You're here early." "Wanted to test the microphone system before the crowds arrive," I said. "Make sure everything's working properly." Jerry nodded approvingly. That's why I love working with you, always thinking ahead. I spent an hour testing the system, which really meant figuring out how to override the scheduled programming and insert my own presentation. By the time the festival officially opened at 10 a.m., I was ready. Nina arrived around 11, looking nervous about her upcoming speech. She was scheduled to speak at noon, right after the mayor's welcome address. She'd brought a small entourage with her. Ava, naturally, plus a few colleagues from her company. Dan showed up around 11:30, wearing his usual uniform of expensive yoga pants and a tight t-shirt that showed off his abs. He'd set up a booth promoting his wellness workshops and was already attracting a crowd of middle-aged women who seemed more interested in his appearance than his spiritual guidance. At exactly noon, Mayor Patterson finished his welcome speech and introduced Nina. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nina Mitchell from Hartwell Communications, who'll be speaking about the importance of corporate community involvement. Nina walked up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began her prepared remarks. She got about 30 seconds in before I made my move. The screens around the festival suddenly went black, then displayed the title slide of my presentation, Community Involvement, a Case Study in Authentic Living. Nina stopped mid-sentence, confused. The audience murmured, unsure what was happening. Then my voice came through the sound system, clear and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sam Mitchell. Some of you might know me from my work with the festival committee over the years. Others might know me as Nina's husband. Well, ex-husband now, thanks to some very interesting community involvement of her own. Nina's face went white. She looked around frantically, trying to locate me in the crowd. I was standing near the sound booth, microphone in hand, completely calm. Now I know what you're thinking, I continued. This is awkward. A man airing his personal business in public. But here's the thing. When your personal business involves fraud, manipulation, and conspiracy, it becomes everyone's business. The crowd was riveted. Nothing draws attention like the promise of scandal. Let me tell you a story about authentic living and mindful relationships. It starts with my wife, Nina, who decided she needed space to figure things out. She announced this via text message while I was out of town at a work conference. Very mindful of her, don't you think? I clicked to the next slide, which showed Nina's text message blown up on the big screens. But Nina wasn't acting alone. She had help. Spiritual guidance, you might say, from a local yoga instructor named Dan Hartley. Dan, would you like to wave to the crowd? The cameras found Dan, who was trying to disappear behind his booth. The crowd turned to stare at him. Dan specializes in flexibility training. Very hands-on approach. He's been helping Nina become more flexible in her interpretation of marriage vows. A few people in the crowd chuckled. Others looked uncomfortable. But the real mastermind behind this community involvement project is Nina's best friend, Ava Morrison. Ava works in HR and has been very interested in Nina's professional development. So interested, in fact, that she's been planning to develop right into Nina's job. I clicked to the next slide, showing Ava's Instagram photos with Dan. Here we see Ava and Dan planning their something special back in July, a full month before Nina even knew Dan existed. And here's Ava trying on Nina's office for size just last week. The crowd was getting restless. Some people were pulling out their phones to record. Others were trying to get a better look at the screens. Now, you might ask, what does this have to do with corporate community involvement? Well, let me show you. The next series of slides detailed Nina's expense account irregularities, her use of company funds for personal trips, her violation of the company's ethics policies regarding personal relationships with vendors. Nina has been very involved with the community, all right. Involved with community yoga instructors, community hotels, community restaurants, all on her company's dime. Nina was backing away from the podium, looking around desperately for an escape route. Ava was pushing through the crowd, trying to reach her. And Dan, our spiritual guide, has been equally involved, not just with Nina, but with several of his married clients. Very holistic approach to wellness. I clicked to a slide showing screenshots of text messages between Dan and 3 different women, all married, all clients of his yoga studio. But here's my favorite part of this community involvement story. Ava, Nina's best friend and co-conspirator, has been playing both sides, comforting Nina while sleeping with Dan, encouraging Nina to leave me while positioning herself to take Nina's job. It's like a masterclass in friendship. The crowd was buzzing now. People were pointing at Nina, Ava, and Dan, whispering to each other, taking photos and videos. So what's the lesson here? What does this teach us about community involvement? Well, I think it shows us that authentic living requires authentic consequences. Dan had apparently had enough. He pushed through the crowd toward the stage, his face red with anger. "You can't do this," he shouted. "This is harassment. This is defamation." "Is it defamation if it's true?" I asked into the microphone. "Dan, would you like to dispute any of the evidence I've presented?" He reached the stage and tried to grab the microphone from me. I easily pushed him back. All those years of manual labor had kept me in better shape than his yoga pretty boy routine. "Careful, Dan. We're in front of a crowd here. Wouldn't want to do anything that might damage your reputation as a peaceful spiritual guide." He swung at me. I saw it coming from a mile away and stepped aside, letting his momentum carry him past me. He stumbled and fell off the stage, landing hard on the grass in front of hundreds of people. The crowd gasped, then started laughing and applauding. And that, folks, is what we call a lack of balance. Ironic for a yoga instructor. Dan struggled to his feet, his white yoga pants now stained with grass and mud. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Namaste down," and the laughter got louder. Meanwhile, Ava had reached Nina and was trying to hustle her away from the festival. But it was too late. The damage was done. Everyone had seen the evidence, heard the story, witnessed Dan's meltdown. "Now, before I wrap up this presentation," I continued, "I want to address Nina directly." The crowd quieted, sensing the climax approaching. "Nina, you wanted space to figure things out. You wanted to explore authentic living and mindful relationships. Well, congratulations, you've figured it out. You've discovered that actions have consequences, that lies have expiration dates, and that betrayal has a price." I clicked to the final slide, which showed a simple message. "For now means forever. You said our separation was for now, just temporary, just until you figured things out. But here's what I figured out. For now means forever. There's no going back. There's no reconciliation. There's no second chance." I looked directly at Nina, who was standing frozen at the edge of the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "You made your choice when you sent that text. You chose Dan over me, chose lies over truth, chose Ava's manipulation over our marriage. So enjoy your authentic living, Nina. Enjoy your mindful relationship with Dan. Enjoy your spiritual guidance from Ava." I paused for effect. "And enjoy explaining all of this to your boss on Monday morning." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Some people were chanting, "Sam, Sam, Sam." Others were taking selfies with the presentation slides still visible in the background. I handed the microphone back to Jerry, who looked stunned but oddly impressed. "That was quite a presentation, Sam." "Thanks. I think it really captured the spirit of community involvement." As I walked away from the stage, I saw Nina being comforted by a few of her colleagues who hadn't yet realized the full implications of what they'd just witnessed. Ava was nowhere to be seen. She'd probably slipped away as soon as she realized how bad this was going to get. Dan was still trying to clean the grass stains off his pants while angry festival goers confronted him about his treatment of their friends and neighbors. My phone was already buzzing with calls and texts. Tess had sent me a string of fire emojis and the message, "Dad, you are savage." Mick had texted, "Holy shit, that was amazing." Even Pete from Nina's company had sent a thumbs up emoji. But the best message came from an unknown number. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Janet Collins from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about your presentation today. Are you available?" I looked back at the chaos I'd created. Nina was gone, probably fleeing to her car. Dan was surrounded by angry women demanding refunds from his yoga studio. Ava was still nowhere to be seen. Mission accomplished. I texted Janet back. "Thanks, but I think the presentation speaks for itself. Have a great day." Then I turned off my phone and walked home to my studio apartment above Mick's bar. I had some celebrating to do. 3 months later, Nina was unemployed and living in a studio apartment across town. Ava had been fired from her HR job when her own company discovered her role in the conspiracy. Dan's yoga studio had closed after dozens of clients canceled their memberships, and several former clients came forward with their own stories of his spiritual guidance. I kept working, kept living in my simple apartment, kept enjoying my freedom from drama and manipulation and lies. Tess visited me regularly now, having gained a new respect for her old man's ability to handle business when pushed too far. "Dad," she said during one of our coffee dates, "I have to ask, did you plan all of that from the beginning?" "Plan what?" "The festival thing, the presentation, the public humiliation of Mom and her friends." I smiled. "Sweetheart, I'm just a facilities manager who knows how to work a sound system. Sometimes that's all you need." She laughed. You're scary when you want to be. Only when people mistake kindness for weakness. Your mother learned the difference, and that was the truth. For 18 years, I'd been the accommodating husband, the supportive partner, the guy who went along to get along. I'd let Nina make most of the decisions, let her friends treat me like furniture, let her take credit for successes that were partly mine. But when she decided to throw away our marriage via text message, when she chose to humiliate me and lie to our daughter and conspire with people who wanted to destroy both of us, she discovered something important about me. I might be just a facilities manager, but I know how to fix problems. And sometimes, fixing a problem means tearing down what's broken and starting over. Nina had wanted authentic living. I gave her authenticity. She'd wanted mindful relationships. I gave her mindfulness about consequences. She'd wanted space to figure things out. I gave her all the space in the world. For now means forever.